Your brain is not broken. It was never broken. You were just using it wrong. Every time you studied harder and still forgot everything, that wasn't failure. That was the wrong method. Every time you couldn't focus no matter how hard you tried, that wasn't weakness. That was the wrong system. Your brain is the most powerful tool you will ever own, but nobody taught you how to use it until now. In the next 30 minutes, you will learn how your brain actually works, how memory forms, how focus builds, how thinking sharpens. This is how you upgrade your brain. Chapter 1. Stop studying harder and start learning smarter. You have been lied to about learning your entire life. Since the moment you sat in a classroom, you were taught one method: read, highlight, reread, repeat. And if you failed, the answer was simple: try harder, study longer, push more. But nobody asked the real question: does this method actually work? It doesn't, and the proof is everywhere. You crammed for exams and forgot everything the next week. You read books and remembered almost nothing a month later. You sat through hours of studying and still felt unprepared. That's not laziness. That's the wrong tool for the job. Here's the truth about your brain. It does not learn through repetition alone. It learns through meaning, through connection, through active retrieval, through struggle. Your brain is not a recording device. It's not just capturing information and storing it neatly. Your brain is constantly deciding what matters and what doesn't, what to keep and what to delete. And it makes that decision based on one thing: usefulness. If information feels useful, your brain strengthens it. If it feels irrelevant, your brain lets it fade. This is why you remember conversations from years ago, but forget what you studied last week. The conversation had emotion, context, personal relevance. The study material felt disconnected, isolated, meaningless. You weren't bad at learning. You were learning in a way your brain was never designed for. Most people try to pour information in. They read more, watch more, listen more, but input is not learning. Input is just exposure, and exposure without engagement creates the illusion of knowledge. You feel familiar with something, but familiarity is not understanding. Real learning happens on the way out, not on the way in. When you try to recall something from memory, your brain sends a signal: this matters, strengthen this pathway. The struggle of retrieval is not a sign of failure. It's the actual mechanism of learning. Think about it this way. Every time you try to remember something, and it's hard, your brain works to rebuild that pathway. And rebuilt pathways are stronger than ones you never had to work for. Easy recall doesn't build memory, hard recall does. This is why the students who score highest are rarely the ones who studied the most. They're the ones who studied most effectively. They tested themselves. They explained ideas out loud. They connected new information to things they already understood. They made the brain work instead of just absorbing. Here's what changes when you understand this. You stop measuring learning by time spent. You start measuring it by mental engagement. You stop asking, did I read this? You start asking, can I explain this? Those are completely different questions, and they produce completely different results. You also stop feeling guilty about not studying enough, because you realize the issue was never quantity, it was quality. 30 minutes of active, engaged, difficult retrieval beats 3 hours of passive rereading every single time. The people who learn fastest aren't necessarily the most intelligent, they're the most strategic. They know how the machine works, and they use it accordingly. Your brain loves patterns. It loves emotion, it loves stories, it loves questions, it loves the effort of making sense out of something difficult. Feed it those things, and it grows. Feed it passive repetition, and it stays the same. What would your life look like if learning actually stuck? If everything you studied became usable knowledge instead of fading within days? Starting today, change how you measure a learning session. Don't ask how long you studied. Ask how hard your brain worked. If you were comfortable the whole time, you weren't learning, you were just spending time. Because learning is not comfortable. Learning is the moment your brain reaches for something it doesn't quite have yet. That reach is growth. That discomfort is the upgrade. Embrace it, chase it, because that's where your real intelligence lives. Chapter 2. Train your attention like the muscle it actually is. Before your brain can remember anything, it has to notice it, and most people never make it past this first step. Attention is the gateway to memory. If information doesn't pass through attention, it never becomes memory. You can sit and study for hours, but if your attention isn't truly there, nothing encodes, nothing sticks, nothing stays. This is why you can read a full page and reach the bottom with no idea what you just read. Your eyes moved, your brain processed words, but attention wasn't there, and without attention, learning is impossible. Most people think they have a memory problem. They don't. They have an attention problem. Fix attention and memory improves automatically, because memory is downstream of attention. Every time. Here's the brutal reality about modern life. It is designed to destroy your attention. Every notification, every scroll, every ping, every tab, your attention is being pulled in 20 directions simultaneously, and every pull has a cost. The cost is called a switching penalty. Every time your brain switches from one task to another, it pays a mental price. You lose time, you lose context, you lose the depth you were building. Stack enough of these penalties and you end up mentally exhausted, but you haven't actually done anything deep. This is why people spend hours on their phones and feel drained, not because the content was hard, because constant switching is cognitively expensive. You burned energy without building anything. Here's what most people get wrong about focus. They think it's about willpower, about gritting your teeth and forcing yourself to concentrate. But willpower runs out. It's a limited resource, and trying to focus through distraction with willpower is like trying to run with weights on your feet. Smart learners don't fight distraction with willpower. They remove distraction before they start. They put the phone in another room. They close unnecessary tabs. They create conditions where focus is the easiest option, because protecting attention is easier than recovering it. Once distraction breaks your concentration, it takes significant time to fully rebuild. You lose the thread, the depth, the flow. Preventing the break is far more efficient than recovering from it. But external distraction is only half the battle. Internal distraction is often louder, the worrying, the planning, the mental replaying. Your mind can pull you away from learning faster than any notification. This is why presence matters. Being physically in a space is not the same as being mentally in it. Real presence means your thinking is here, on this, right now, not on yesterday's conversation or tomorrow's meeting. You build mental presence the same way you build any strength. Gradually, consistently. You don't start by trying to focus for 2 hours. You start with 10 minutes of genuine full attention. 10 minutes where you catch yourself drifting and bring yourself back. That catching and returning is the exercise that's attention training. Then 15 minutes, then 20. Your attention span grows because you're treating it as a trainable capacity, not a fixed trait. Here's another key. Before you learn anything, give your brain a job. Ask it a question. What am I trying to understand here? What problem does this solve? How does this connect to what I already know? Questions activate the brain differently than passive consumption. They create relevance, and relevance tells the brain this is worth paying attention to. Without a job, your brain wanders. With a job, it locks in. Attention also runs on physical fuel. Poor sleep destroys focus. Dehydration slows thinking. Chronic stress narrows awareness. You cannot demand peak attention from a depleted brain. Attention is a biological resource before it's a mental one. When was the last time you gave something your complete and undivided attention? Not half attention while checking your phone. Not divided attention while thinking about something else. True, full, present attention. Starting today, protect the first 30 minutes of any learning session like it's your most valuable asset, because it is. Turn everything off. Remove everything competing for your focus. Then show up completely, because memory doesn't follow effort. Memory follows attention. And when your attention sharpens, everything you learn starts to stick. Chapter 3. Make information stick. By connecting it to what you know, most information doesn't disappear because your memory is weak. It disappears because it had nothing to attach to. Your brain stores information in networks, not boxes. Think about the difference between a city with roads and a city with no roads. In a city with roads, every location is reachable. You can navigate from anywhere to anywhere. But if there are no roads, every building stands alone, isolated, hard to find, easy to lose. Your brain works the same way. Information connected to other information is like a building with roads leading to it, easy to reach, easy to retrieve, but information that stands alone is like a building in the middle of nowhere. Even if it's there, you can't find it when you need it. This is why memorizing isolated facts doesn't work. Your brain was never built for that. It was built to store relationships between things, patterns, causes and effects, similarities and differences, categories and exceptions. The more ways you connect a new idea to things you already know, the more pathways lead back to it. More pathways mean faster retrieval. Faster retrieval means the knowledge actually exists when you need it. So how do you create connections? You ask questions that force the brain to make links. What does this remind me of? How is this similar to something I already understand? Where does this fit in what I already know? What would happen if this were different? These questions don't just help you understand. They build the road network. They give new information a neighborhood to live in, instead of an empty field. Another powerful connection tool is comparison. The brain learns new things by relating them to known things. If you're learning about how electricity moves through circuits, you can compare it to how water moves through pipes. The new concept borrows structure from the familiar one, instantly more understandable, instantly more memorable. Images are another form of connection. The brain remembers pictures far better than abstract words. If you're learning about compound interest, picture a snowball rolling downhill, getting bigger with every rotation. Now the abstract concept has a shape, a visual anchor, and visual anchors are far harder to forget than definitions. Emotion also creates connection. When something surprises you, excites you, or even confuses you in an interesting way, your brain tags it as worth keeping. Curiosity is an emotional signal. It tells the brain this is important, pay attention, keep this. You can manufacture curiosity. Before learning anything, ask a question you genuinely want answered. Let the material answer that question. Suddenly you're not consuming content. You're finding solutions, and solutions feel meaningful. Meaning creates memory. Stories are another glue. A list of 10 facts fades quickly, but those same 10 facts arranged into a cause and effect story can last for years. Stories give information sequence. Sequence gives the brain a structure to hang facts on. Structure prevents forgetting. Here's something powerful. The brain also remembers unusual things better than normal ones. If you create an exaggerated, ridiculous, or surprising mental image to represent something you're learning, it sticks far better than a normal image would. Strange is memorable, normal is forgettable. But the deepest connection of all is personal relevance. When you can answer the question, how does this affect my actual life? Your brain treats the information completely differently. It shifts from category of abstract knowledge to category of things that matter to me. And things that matter to you never fade as fast as things that don't. Before every learning session, ask yourself one question. Why does this matter to me personally? If you can answer that clearly, your retention will improve dramatically, because your brain isn't storing information for the sake of information. It's storing what it believes will help you survive and thrive. How much knowledge have you lost simply because you never connected it to anything real? From now on, every time you learn something new, spend 2 minutes making connections, link it to something familiar, give it an image, find the personal relevance, build the road. Because information without roads is just clutter, but information inside a network becomes intelligence. Chapter 4. Use retrieval practice to build real memory strength. There is a massive difference between recognizing something and actually knowing it. Most people confuse the two, and that confusion is why they feel prepared right up until the moment they need to perform. Recognition is easy. You see something that's been shown to you before, and it feels familiar, it feels known. You think, yes, I know this. But when the book closes and someone asks you to explain it, the knowledge isn't there. That gap between recognition and real knowledge is where most learning strategies fail. Reread a chapter 3 times and you'll recognize it perfectly. But your brain will struggle to produce it without help, because recognition is built by seeing. Real memory is built by retrieving. Retrieval means pulling something out of your memory without looking, without hints, without the material in front of you. Just you and what your brain has actually stored. Here's why this is so powerful. Every time you try to retrieve something and succeed, you strengthen that memory pathway. The act of retrieval is itself a learning event, not just a test of learning, the actual thing that makes learning permanent. This is called the testing effect, and it is one of the most consistently proven findings in memory research. Testing yourself on material produces far better long-term retention than rereading that material. Not a little better, dramatically better. But most people avoid retrieval practice because it's uncomfortable. When you try to recall something and struggle, it feels bad. It feels like you don't know it. It feels like failure. So you look at the answer quickly to stop the discomfort, and in doing so, you cut off the exact process that would have built real memory. The struggle is the point. The mental effort of reaching for something just outside your grasp is what signals the brain to strengthen that pathway. Every time you stop the struggle early, you stop the growth signal. Here's the practice. After reading or learning something, close everything, then write down or say out loud everything you can remember without looking. This feels harder than rereading. It is harder, and that difficulty is doing the work. Then look back and check what you missed. Your gaps become your guide. Now you know exactly what needs more work. You're not studying randomly. You're targeting exactly what your brain hasn't stored yet. That's efficient learning. Another version is the teach-back method. After learning something, explain it as if you're teaching a complete beginner. No notes, no material, just you and what you actually understand. This is one of the most powerful learning techniques available, because teaching requires you to organize, simplify, and produce. You can't teach what you don't understand, and every gap in your explanation shows you exactly where your understanding is incomplete. You don't need an actual student. Explain it to yourself out loud, or write it as if writing for someone with no background knowledge. The process of simplifying forces deep understanding in a way that passive consumption never can. Spaced retrieval adds another layer. Instead of reviewing all at once, spread your retrieval practice over time. Review something today, then in 2 days, then in a week, then in a month. Each retrieval happens just as the memory is starting to fade, and catching it right at that edge makes the pathway dramatically stronger. This is why cramming fails long-term. You stuff information in all at once. There's no spaced retrieval, no pathway strengthening over time. The memory peaks briefly, then fades because the brain never had reason to build durable storage. How many things have you studied that you can't actually recall right now? How much time did you invest that produced no lasting knowledge? Starting today, test yourself before you reread. Every time you want to review something, try to recall it first. Write it out, say it out loud, build the pathway through retrieval. Then check yourself and correct what's missing. Because real knowledge isn't what you can recognize when you see it. Real knowledge is what you can produce when you need it. And that kind of knowledge only comes from practice pulling it out. Chapter 5. Think in systems, not just facts, to unlock real intelligence. A brilliant mind is not one that stores the most facts. It's one that understands how things connect, how systems work, how one thing causes another. Experts don't just know more, they know differently. Think about a city map. If you memorized 50 random street names, you'd forget most of them within days. But if you understand how the city is laid out, where the main roads are, which areas connect to which, you can navigate anywhere, even streets you've never memorized specifically. That's the difference between facts and systems. Facts are individual pieces. Systems are the structure that holds pieces together, and structure is what allows real thinking. Most people learn facts. They collect isolated pieces of information. An interesting statistic here, a useful quote there, a technique from a book, but nothing connects. Everything floats. Floating knowledge is fragile. Under pressure it disappears. Under time it fades. Under questions it collapses, because there's nothing holding it together. System-based knowledge is completely different. When you understand the system behind something, details become easier to learn because they have a structure to attach to, and even when you forget a detail, you can often reason your way back to it because you understand how the whole thing works. Experts do this naturally. A doctor doesn't memorize every symptom separately. They understand systems of the body, how organs interact, how symptoms relate to underlying processes. New information slots into that existing structure almost automatically. A chess master doesn't memorize every possible move. They recognize patterns, configurations, strategic principles. When they see the board, they don't compute from scratch. They recognize what kind of situation this is and what tends to work in situations like this. That's pattern recognition built from system understanding. And pattern recognition is what makes thinking fast, accurate, and reliable. So how do you shift from fact collecting to system building? You change the questions you ask. Instead of "what is this?" ask "how does this work?" Instead of "what should I know?" ask "what causes what here?" Instead of "what are the parts?" ask "how do the parts affect each other?" These questions force you to look for structure, for mechanism, for relationship, and when you find those things, you're building a mental model. Mental models are the foundation of expert thinking. Here's another shift. Learn principles before details. Most people try to learn details first. They memorize facts before understanding the underlying concepts. But that's backwards. The brain needs branches before it can hold leaves. When you understand a principle clearly, details become much easier to attach. Without the principle, details fall away because they have nothing to connect to. Start with the big picture, the core idea, the fundamental mechanism. Then add details. Details that fit into a structure stay. Details floating without structure don't. Systems thinking also helps you transfer knowledge. Transfer means using what you know in a new situation you've never specifically learnt about. This is real intelligence, not just repeating what you memorized, actually adapting knowledge to new problems. If you only know isolated facts, transfer is impossible. You can only respond to situations that match exactly what you studied. But if you understand systems and principles, you can reason through situations you've never seen before, because you understand the underlying logic. Decisions also become faster when you think in systems. You don't have to reason from scratch every time. You recognize patterns. You see which type of situation this is. Your mental model guides your response. That speed and accuracy is what looks like intuition from the outside. It's actually compressed system knowledge. How much more powerful would your thinking be if your knowledge was organized into clear structures instead of scattered pieces? Starting today, after every learning session, ask yourself one question. Can I draw a simple diagram showing how these ideas connect? If you can't, you haven't learnt the system yet. You've only collected facts. Build the map, not just the destinations, the roads between them. Because intelligence lives in the connections, and connections are what turn information into understanding. Chapter 6. Build the biological conditions your brain needs to perform. You cannot run advanced software on broken hardware, but that's exactly what most people try to do every day. They want better focus, but they're sleeping 5 hours a night. They want stronger memory, but they're dehydrated and stressed. They want sharper thinking, but their brain is running on empty, trying to operate in conditions it was never built for. Then they blame themselves for lack of discipline. But discipline has nothing to do with it. Biology does. Your brain is not a concept. It's living tissue, and tissue has requirements. Meet those requirements and the brain performs. Ignore them and it struggles, no matter how motivated you are. Let's start with sleep. Sleep is not rest. Sleep is neural maintenance. During deep sleep, your brain does 3 things that are critical for learning. It consolidates memory. Everything you learned during the day that was fragile and temporary gets stabilized during sleep. It clears metabolic waste. The brain produces waste products during operation, and sleep is when the cleanup happens, and it resets emotional balance so you can think clearly the next day. This means that studying late into the night while sacrificing sleep is actively counterproductive. You're trying to build memory while cutting off the process that makes memory permanent. You're working against your own brain. Poor sleep weakens attention, slows processing speed, reduces working memory, increases emotional reactivity, all of which directly block learning. But strong, consistent sleep improves all of those things dramatically. Sleep is not optional for mental performance. It's foundational. Next is nutrition. Your brain consumes a disproportionately large share of your body's energy. It runs on stable blood glucose, healthy fats, amino acids, micronutrients, water. When blood sugar spikes and crashes, attention fluctuates wildly. When you're dehydrated, thinking slows measurably. When nutrition is poor, the chemicals your brain uses to communicate between cells are produced at reduced levels. Less communication means less cognition. Many people who think they have a focus problem actually have a fuel problem. Stable energy equals stable attention, and stable attention equals better learning. Food is not just body fuel, it is brain fuel. Movement is another, non-negotiable. Physical activity increases blood flow to the brain. More blood flow means more oxygen. More oxygen means better processing. Movement also stimulates growth factors that support the actual physical growth and survival of brain cells. Even a short walk before a learning session can measurably improve mental clarity. Your brain and body are not separate systems. They are one system operating together. When you activate the body, you activate the brain. Stress is the silent killer of cognition. Short bursts of stress can actually sharpen performance. But chronic stress floods the brain with cortisol, and cortisol impairs memory formation, reduces creativity, and narrows attention to a narrow survival focus. Under chronic stress, your brain shifts into threat detection mode. Learning requires openness and exploration. Threat detection mode is the opposite of that. You cannot build complex knowledge when your brain is focused entirely on defense. Managing stress is not a luxury, it's cognitive maintenance. Because a regulated nervous system learns, a threatened nervous system protects, and protection blocks growth. Your environment also shapes your brain's performance. Cluttered, chaotic spaces create cluttered, chaotic thinking. Clean, organized environments reduce the cognitive friction your brain has to work through before it can focus on actual learning. Lighting, air quality, noise levels, temperature, these all influence how your brain operates. You're not just designing a workspace, you're designing a cognitive environment, and that environment sends constant signals to your brain about what mode to be in. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If you're consistently struggling to focus, to remember, to think clearly, the first question shouldn't be what learning strategy should I try. It should be what biological conditions am I operating in? Because no strategy works well on a depleted foundation. But when the foundation is solid, everything works better. Focus becomes natural. Memory becomes stronger. Learning becomes lighter. Starting today, treat sleep as a learning tool, not a personal weakness you're overcoming by sleeping less. Protect your sleep the way you'd protect your most valuable study time, because biologically it is. Chapter 7. Build the identity that makes growth your default state. Everything you've learned in this script means nothing if you return to the same patterns tomorrow. Techniques without identity don't last. Methods without mindset don't stick. Change without a new self-concept always fades. This is why most people who learn about learning don't actually learn differently. They feel inspired. They agree with the ideas. They might try something new for a few days, and then gradually, invisibly, they drift back because the techniques were added to an old identity, and old identities pull hard. Your brain listens to the story you tell about yourself, and then it adapts your behavior to match that story. If you see yourself as someone who gets distracted easily, you tolerate distraction. If you see yourself as someone with a bad memory, you stop investing in memory training. If you see yourself as not a natural learner, you back away from challenge. The story is not just a belief, it's a behavioral instruction, and your brain follows instructions. This is why identity is the most important upgrade of all. Not a technique, not a strategy, not a hack. Who you believe you are determines what actions feel natural and what actions feel foreign. Here's the shift. Stop saying, I'm trying to focus better. Start saying, I'm someone who protects my attention. Stop saying, I want to remember more. Start saying, I train my memory every day. That subtle difference in language changes the relationship between you and the behavior. Trying keeps things optional. Being makes them automatic. And automatic behavior is what compounds over time. You don't have to think about whether to brush your teeth. It's just something you do, because someone who takes care of themselves is part of your identity. You want learning to feel that way, not like a choice you make when motivated, like something you do because it's who you are. Here's how identity shifts. Not through one dramatic decision, through small, consistent actions that add up to a new self-image. Every time you retrieve instead of reread, you reinforce the identity of someone who trains their brain. Every time you protect your focus instead of giving in to distraction, you reinforce the identity of someone who values deep thinking. Every time you make connections instead of memorizing facts, you reinforce the identity of a strategic learner. The actions create evidence. Evidence builds belief. Belief changes identity. Identity changes behavior. That loop is how real transformation works. Identity also changes your relationship with difficulty. When learning feels hard, most people interpret it as a sign they're not good at learning. But someone with a strong learner identity interprets it differently. Hard means growing. Hard means I'm in the right territory. Hard is the signal, not the problem. That reframe changes everything. Because difficulty is unavoidable in real learning. The question is whether you interpret it as failure or as growth. Identity determines which story you tell. Compound learners have one thing in common. They don't rely on motivation, they rely on identity. Motivation fluctuates. Some days you feel like learning, some days you don't. If learning depends on motivation, it's inconsistent. Inconsistency prevents compounding. But when learning is part of who you are, you show up regardless. Not perfectly, not always with enthusiasm, but consistently. And consistency over months and years produces something extraordinary. A brain that just keeps getting better. Your environment should reflect and reinforce your identity. Surround yourself with people who value growth. Consume content that sharpens your thinking. Design your space to make learning the easy choice. When environment and identity align, behavior becomes effortless. Think about where you are right now compared to a year ago. What would be possible 5 years from now if you compounded learning every single day? Starting today, choose your identity first. Not your technique, not your strategy. Decide who you are. Someone who trains their mind, someone who learns every day, someone who grows regardless of conditions. Then let that identity guide your actions, because the brain you build from here depends entirely on the story you choose to believe about yourself. Choose a bigger story, and your brain will grow to match it. Outro. That is how you upgrade your brain. Not through talent, not through luck, through understanding how your mind actually works and using it accordingly. Your brain is not fixed. It is trainable. It is upgradable. It always has been. Now go train it.